The thing about waking up in a situation you absolutely positively cannot explain is that your brain, clever little organ that it is, tries to rationalize everything before panic sets in. So when I opened my eyes that morning and found myself staring at what could only be described as the most terrifyingly beautiful creature I'd ever seen, my first thought wasn't, "Oh God, I'm going to die." No, my first thought was, did I drink something weird at Kenji's party last night? But then I remembered I hadn't been to any party. I'd been on a routine cargo run to Epsilon Station, hauling medical supplies and about 6 tons of freeze-dried noodles, because apparently space stations run on carbohydrates and bad coffee. My name's Vincent Hale, by the way. And up until approximately 8 hours ago, I was a perfectly boring, perfectly unremarkable freight pilot who'd never so much as seen an alien, let alone woken up with one draped across my chest like some kind of intergalactic body pillow. And not just any alien, mind you. This was clearly someone important, someone powerful. I could tell by the way her chitinous crown, yes, crown, caught the dim light filtering through whatever the hell kind of room we were in. Her skin, if you could call it that, shimmered between deep violet and midnight blue, covered in patterns that looked like someone had painted constellations across her shoulders and back. She had 4 arms, 2 tucked against her sides, 2 wrapped around me with a grip that suggested she could probably crush my ribs if she felt like it, and her breathing made this soft, thrumming sound that I could feel vibrating through my entire body. Oh, and I couldn't move. Not a single muscle, completely utterly paralyzed from the neck down. Fantastic. I tried to remember how I'd gotten here, but my memory had more holes in it than a politician's promise. There was the cargo run, obviously. Then there was that weird distress signal we'd picked up near the Helix Nebula. Against my better judgment and the very stern warnings from my co-pilot, Yuki Tanaka, who had way more common sense than I did, we'd gone to investigate. Standard hero complex nonsense. Really. Someone needed help, we had to check it out. That's where things got fuzzy. I remembered boarding what looked like a derelict ship, Yuki arguing with me over the comms about protocol and safety regulations I was cheerfully ignoring, and then light. Lots of light. And sound. A frequency that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. And then nothing, until now, until this impossible moment where I was apparently playing the role of teddy bear deer. What I was increasingly certain was some kind of alien royalty. The irony wasn't lost on me. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Assembly for exactly 17 years, not long enough to stop being the weird new kids, but long enough that we'd stopped treating every alien encounter like a potential Independence Day scenario. We'd made friends, made enemies, made incredibly awkward diplomatic incidents involving Earth's ambassador and what he thought was a handshake, but was actually a mating gesture. You know, the usual. But in all that time, and all those carefully orchestrated first contacts and cultural exchange programs, nobody had mentioned anything about alien queens who apparently had a thing for unconscious human pilot. She stirred slightly, and my heart, one of the few parts of me still taking orders from my brain, kicked into overdrive. Her breathing pattern changed, the thrumming deepened, and one of her hands tightened just a fraction against my shoulder. I held my breath, which was stupid because she was clearly still asleep and me not breathing wasn't going to change that. But panic makes you do stupid things. Her face was, well, calling it beautiful felt inadequate, but I didn't have better words. Sharp features that looked carved from something precious, high cheekbones that could cut glass, and these markings along her temples that pulsed with faint bioluminescence. Her eyes, currently closed, thank God, because I wasn't ready for that level of confrontation, were set behind a delicate ridge of what looked like bone or hardened chitin. And her mouth. Okay, I was trying very hard not to think about her mouth, which was dangerous territory for a guy who was A, paralyzed, B, confused, and C, increasingly aware that this entire situation was going to require explanations I absolutely did not have. The room around us was clearly a sleeping quarter of some kind, but it was like nothing I'd seen on human ships or even in the handful of alien vessels I'd visited. The walls curved organically, almost breathing, covered in the same bioluminescent patterns that marked her skin. The bed, if you could call it that, seemed to be grown from the floor rather than placed there. A soft, living thing that adjusted to our weight. Everything smelled strange, too. Not bad, but definitely alien. Something between ozone and flowers I couldn't name, with an undertone that made my lizard brain want to label it as predator. Which, considering I was currently being used as a pillow by said predator, seemed pretty accurate. I heard voices outside, or what I assumed were voices. The language was all clicks and harmonics. Nothing my translator implant could parse, which meant either it was broken or these people weren't in any of the databases. Neither option thrilled me. The sounds grew closer, then faded, and I realized with growing horror that wherever I was surrounded by more of whatever she was. Okay, Vincent, I thought, trying to keep the panic at bay. Let's think this through logically. You're paralyzed but not dead, which suggests they want you alive. You're in what appears to be someone's personal quarters, not a cell, which suggests you're not a prisoner. You're being cuddled by someone who radiates authority and power, which suggests, actually, I had no idea what that suggested. And the more I thought about it, the more my brain wanted to shut down and reboot. She made a sound then, soft and almost content. Her head shifted slightly, nestling closer against my shoulder, and I felt something brush against my neck. Antennae, I realized. Delicate and sensitive, probably picking up my racing pulse, and the cold sweat I was definitely producing. Great. Nothing says I'm a calm and collected representative of humanity quite like smelling like fear and confusion. But here's the thing about fear. If you sit with it long enough, if you let it run its course without feeding it, it starts to fade into something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or resignation. Or in my case, a weird, inappropriate sense of amusement at the sheer absurdity of the situation. Because of course this would happen to me. Of course. I couldn't just have a normal cargo run. Couldn't just deliver noodles and medical supplies without somehow ending up as the apparently voluntary sleeping companion to an alien queen. Yuki was never going to let me hear the end of this. Assuming I lived long enough to tell her about it. The thought of my co-pilot sent a fresh wave of worry through me. Where was she? Was she okay? Had she been captured too? Or had she managed to escape? Knowing Yuki, she'd probably followed protocol, called for backup, and was currently coordinating some kind of rescue mission while simultaneously filing 17 different incident reports, because that woman loved her paperwork more than life itself, or she was dead. And I was alone in whatever this place was. No, I couldn't think like that. Yuki Tanaka didn't die. She was too stubborn, too competent, too absolutely determined to survive long enough to prove all her safety protocols were correct. She was fine. She had to be fine. The Queen, I was just going to call her that until I learned otherwise, shifted again, and this time I felt her starting to wake up. The change was subtle at first. Her breathing pattern shifted from deep and slow to something lighter, quicker. The thrumming sound changed pitch. Her fingers flexed against my shoulder, testing, sensing, and I knew with absolute certainty that in about 10 seconds, those eyes were going to open and I was going to have to figure out very quickly whether I was breakfast, a hostage, or something infinitely more complicated. I chose my next action very carefully. I cleared my throat, one of the few voluntary actions still available to me, making a soft, non-threatening sound that I hoped conveyed, "Hello, I'm awake now and would very much like to know what's happening without anyone dying. Please and thank you." Her eyes opened. They were golden. Not metaphorically golden, not brownish yellow that could be called golden in the right light. Actually, genuinely, impossibly golden, like someone had poured molten amber into her skull and lit it from within. They focused on me immediately, and I watched as recognition or maybe surprise or possibly alarm flickered across her alien features. We stared at each other for what felt like several centuries but was probably only 3 seconds, and then, impossibly, she smiled. Not a threatening, predatory smile, but something softer, almost amused. Her hand came up, one of the upper ones moving with deliberate slowness, and touched my face, fingers cool and careful against my jaw. She said something in that clicking, harmonic language. her voice surprisingly gentle, and even though I didn't understand the words, I understood the tone. She was asking if I was okay. I tried to answer, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate, which seemed to confirm something for her. She made a sound that might have been a sigh or might have been laughter, hard to tell with alien physiology, and then she did something with her other hand, pressing 2 fingers against a point on my neck that I definitely didn't know existed. Sensation flooded back into my body like someone had flipped a switch. Not gradually, not gently, but all at once. Every nerve screaming back online simultaneously. I gasped, my back arching involuntarily, and she held me steady with surprising gentleness as my body remembered how to take orders from my brain again. "Easy," she said. And oh, that was interesting, because now I could understand her. The translator implant must have needed time to analyze her language, or maybe she'd done something to activate it when she touched my neck. "You're safe. Breathe, Vincent Hale of Earth." She knew my name. She knew what planet I was from. And her voice, God, her voice was like music and thunder, having a conversation, rich and layered and doing absolutely inappropriate things to my recently reactivated nervous system. I managed to form words, though they came out rough and uncertain. "How? How do you know my name?" Her smile widened, showing teeth that were definitely designed for tearing things apart. And those golden eyes sparkled with something that looked dangerously like mischief. "Because, dear pilot, you've been broadcasting your identity quite loudly for the past 8 hours. Your ship's transponder, your neural implant signature, even your biological markers. My people are very good at reading such things." She paused, tilting her head in a gesture that was almost human. "Also, you talk in your sleep, quite extensively, about noodles, mostly. And someone named Yuki, who apparently doesn't appreciate your sense of humor." I wanted to be embarrassed, but honestly, the noodle confession tracked. I'd been having stress dreams about injury manifests for weeks. "Where's Yuki?" I asked, my voice gaining strength as my body continued remembering how to function. "My co-pilot." She's fine," the Queen said, settling back slightly but not releasing me entirely. "Frightened, angry, and currently threatening my guards with what I believe are 17 different violations of interstellar law, but physically unharmed. Your friend has quite the vocabulary when properly motivated." Relief washed through me so powerfully, I almost laughed. "Yeah, that's Yuki. She probably already filed the paperwork for a formal complaint. 3 formal complaints, actually, and a lawsuit." The Queen's amusement was evident. "I like her. She reminds me of my 3rd sister, all thorns and protocols." Her expression shifted then, becoming more serious. "But we should discuss why you're here, Vincent Hale, and why I find myself in the rather unusual position of waking up with a human in my sleeping quarters." "Trust me, I have the same question," I said, finally managing to prop myself up on my elbows. "Last thing I remember, we were investigating a distress signal, then light, sound, and nothing until I woke up paralyzed, and being used as your personal pillow." She had the decency to look slightly sheepish, which was fascinating on someone who radiated that much authority. "Yes. Well, that requires some explanation. My name is Thessa of the Veilkeepers, Queen of the 7th Fleet, and until approximately 9 hours ago, I was dying." That got my attention. "Dying?" "Quite thoroughly, yes." She shifted, moving with liquid grace to sit properly, though she kept one hand resting on my arm as if afraid I might vanish. "My people, the Veilkeepers, we're empathic by nature. We feed on emotional resonance, on the psychic energy that living beings produce. It's not predatory," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "Think of it like breathing. You don't harm the air by breathing it." "Okay," I said slowly. "So what happened?" "We were ambushed by the Drex Collective, nasty species. All logic and no soul. They hunt us specifically because we're everything they despise. The battle was brutal. My ship was crippled, my crew decimated, and I was injured badly enough that my empathic senses shut down. Without them, without that connection to life and emotion around me, I started fading. We managed to send out a distress signal, but I knew I wouldn't last long enough for our reinforcements to arrive." She looked at me then, and something in those golden eyes made my chest tighten. And then, you showed up. You and your impossibly brave, impossibly foolish decision to board a damaged alien vessel to help people you'd never met. It seemed like the right thing to do, I said. Feeling defensive, someone needed help. Most species in the galaxy would have scanned the ship, determined it was Veil Keeper, and left us to die. We're not popular. Our abilities frighten people. They think we're manipulators, predators, threats. Her fingers tightened slightly on my arm. But you didn't know what we were. You just knew someone was hurting and you could help. I was starting to piece together where this was going, and I wasn't sure I liked it. So what happened when we boarded? Your emotional resonance, your psychic signature. It was like nothing I'd ever encountered. Humans are new to the galactic stage. We didn't have much data on your species' empathic presence, but you. She laughed softly, the sound doing weird things to my pulse. Vincent Hale. You broadcast emotion like a supernova. Joy, curiosity, compassion, fear, excitement. All of it blazing so brightly it cut through my dying consciousness like a beacon. I latched onto you instinctively, drew you in, fed on that incredible energy. You fed on me. I probably should have been more alarmed, but honestly, after everything else this barely registered, I did. I'm still doing it, actually, though much more carefully now. She gestured at the space between us. That's why you were paralyzed when you woke. I had you in what we call a resonance lock, a deep empathic connection that allowed me to stabilize myself using your emotional energy. It's incredibly intimate, incredibly rare, and usually only done between bonded pairs or family members. Oh no. So, when you say intimate, I know you better than I've ever known anyone who wasn't Veil Keeper. Thassa said bluntly. I know you're terrified right now, but hiding it behind humor, because that's how you cope. I know you feel responsible for everyone around you, even strangers. I know you dream about exploring the galaxy, but you're afraid you're not brave enough to actually do it. I know you think about your father every time you make a jump through hyperspace, because he was the one who taught you to fly. And I know, she paused, something softer entering her expression. I know you're lonely, Vincent. So deeply, achingly lonely, even when you're surrounded by people. I couldn't speak. Having your soul read like a book wasn't something you could really prepare for. And you saved my life, she continued quietly. Not just by showing up, but by being exactly who you are. Your compassion, your determination, your absolutely stubborn refusal to leave someone behind. It gave me something to hold on to, something to anchor myself to while my body healed. You burned so brightly that I couldn't fade away. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words settling between us. Finally, I found my voice. So, the cuddling. She actually laughed. The sound rich and genuine. The cuddling, as you so eloquently put it, was necessary to maintain the resonance lock. Physical proximity strengthens empathic connections. Also, her smile turned mischievous again. You're very comfortable and you smell nice, like coffee and something spicy I can't identify. Probably the hot sauce I put on everything, I muttered, then caught myself. Wait, so if you were feeding on my emotions, does that mean you felt everything I was feeling when I woke up? The panic, the confusion, the inappropriate attraction to someone who could probably kill you with one hand. Thessa's grin was absolutely Wicklick. Yes, Vincent. I felt all of that. Very flattering, by the way, I groaned, covering my face with my hands. This is the worst first contact scenario in human history. I disagree. I think it's rather charming. She pulled my hands away from my face, forcing me to meet her eyes. Listen to me. What happened here? What we shared. It's not something that can be undone. I've touched your mind, your soul, and you've touched mine. Among my people, that creates a bond, a connection that persists even across distance and time. I'll always be able to sense you, and you'll carry a piece of my presence with you wherever you go. That should have terrified me. Instead, I felt curious, maybe even hopeful. What does that mean exactly? It means, dear pilot, that you've somehow managed to accidentally bond yourself to a Veil Keeper queen, which is going to make your life infinitely more complicated and infinitely more interesting. She stood, pulling me up with her with surprising gentleness. It means you're under my protection now, whether you want it or not. It means my enemies are your enemies, my allies are your allies, and if you ever need help, truly need it, I'll know and I'll come. I steadied myself, testing my legs, relieved when they held. And if I just want to go back to hauling noodles and medical supplies, Thessa's expression softened. Then I'll let you go, and I'll make sure you and Yuki get safely back to human space with a very generous payment for your assistance. No obligations, no demands. What happened here was my doing, my choice, my need. You don't owe me anything, but I could hear the unspoken word hanging between us. But I'd like to see you again, she said simply. Not because of the bond or because you saved my life, but because in the brief time I've known you, truly known you, I found you fascinating, frustrating, and entirely too brave for your own good. The galaxy needs more people like you, Vincent Hale. People who help strangers. People who choose compassion over caution. Before I could respond, the door to the quarters opened, or rather the wall rippled and created an opening, and a tall, armored figure stepped through. Another Veilkeeper, male, with markings that suggested military rank. He said something rapid and urgent in their language. Thessa's entire demeanor shifted, authority settling over her like a cloak. My second-in-command, Vex, she explained to me, then responded to him in their tongue. The conversation was brief but clearly intense. When it ended, she turned back to me, her expression grim. The Drex Collective has found us again. My fleet is arriving, but we need to evacuate this damaged ship before they strike. Which means, Vincent Hale, you're about to see exactly how Veilkeepers fight. She moved to a wall, touched it, and it rippled, producing armor that looked grown rather than crafted. Stay close to me. Your friend Yuki is already being moved to a secure transport. You'll be together soon. And after? I asked, watching as she transformed from sleepy queen to warrior in seconds. She paused at the door, looking back with those impossible golden eyes. After, we see if you're as brave as I think you are. After we figure out what this bond between us means. After, her smile was fierce and beautiful and terrifying all at once. We teach the Drex Collective why hunting Veilkeepers is a mistake they won't survive to repeat. The ship shuddered, hit by something massive, and alarms began wailing in that harmonic language. Thessa extended her hand to me, and I took it without hesitation, letting her pull me into the chaos of a ship preparing for battle. 3 days later, after the fight was won and Yuki and I were safely aboard our own ship with a cargo hold full of Veilkeeper technology and enough credits to retire, I stood on the bridge and stared at the communications console. Thessa had given me a device, a small living crystal that pulsed in time with my heartbeat, and told me it would let me contact her across any distance. Yuki watched me from her station, having finally stopped lecturing me about protocols and safety regulations. You going to call her? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. I held the crystal, feeling its warmth, feeling something else too. A distant presence, like a song I could almost hear. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I think I am. Because here's what I'd learned in my brief, chaotic, absolutely insane time with an alien queen. The galaxy was bigger, stranger, and more wonderful than I'd ever imagined. And sometimes the bravest thing you could do wasn't ignoring the distress signal. Sometimes it was answering it, consequences be damned. I activated the crystal and light bloomed, and somewhere across the vast darkness of space, I felt her smile.